The text came at 7:13 a.m., right when the world still felt soft enough to forgive. You're not welcome to Christmas. Dad wants just family. I stared at the words until the screen dimmed, my reflection staring back at me with that same tight-lipped calm I'd perfected over years of being the quiet one, the one who stayed polite, composed, invisible. I typed my reply slowly, each word measured, deliberate. Don't make that mistake. Then I set the phone down and let the silence stretch, heavy and humming, the way silence always does before something breaks. My sister, Amelia, had always been the sun in every room, bright, loud, impossible to ignore, while I was the one orbiting her, reflecting just enough light to stay visible. Growing up, she'd been the favorite without ever needing to try, the one Dad bragged about at dinner parties, the one whose mistakes were learning experiences. Mine were character flaws. Even when I built my own life, they kept me at arm's length, smiling through teeth that whispered, "You've done well, but you're still not one of us." So when that text came, it wasn't surprising, just final. The weeks that followed passed with a kind of eerie clarity, the way air feels right before a thunderstorm. I watched from a distance as they posted photos, the big tree in the living room, Dad carving roasts like a magazine ad for family values, Amelia in her red sweater, the kind of image you'd think was warmth if you didn't know the rot underneath. They didn't know that I'd been quietly watching, waiting, calculating. I'd left that town years ago, but I hadn't left my connections or my ambition. My company had been growing fast, faster than even I expected, buying old properties for redevelopment. When a portfolio of coastal estates came up for sale, I noticed the address immediately. The family home, listed quietly through a trust, almost hidden, as if fate itself was daring me. I didn't hesitate. The signatures were inked before Amelia could finish her next caption about gratitude. I remember the night it all broke. I was sitting in my hotel room overlooking the city, the kind of view people post to show they've made it, except I didn't need anyone to know yet. The local news played softly in the background, the anchor smiling as she introduced a segment on a major real estate development set to transform one of the region's most historic neighborhoods. My name came next, crisp, confident, followed by my interview, filmed earlier that week. "We're excited to preserve the charm of the area while bringing new life to the properties," I said, my tone steady, professional. But I knew exactly what those words meant for them. The property under their feet was no longer theirs. It belonged to me. By morning, the news had spread. My phone started vibrating nonstop, messages flashing like warnings. "Did you really buy the house? What's happening?" Then came the call, Amelia's name lighting up my screen. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Her voice broke the second I picked up, that perfect tone of controlled panic. "You can't do this," she said, and it wasn't a question. "Dad's furious. He said this must be a mistake." I let the silence breathe before replying. "No mistake." I could hear her inhale sharply, the sound of years of certainty crumbling. "This isn't right," she said, her voice cracking. "You can't just take," I cut her off. "It's for family only." The call from Amelia didn't end with her silence. It was only the first crack. By the next afternoon, Dad's lawyer had called, his tone clipped and rehearsed, like someone trying to sound in control while standing on thin ice. "Your father would like to discuss the terms of the property transfer," he said. I could hear papers shuffling in the background, that nervous sound people make when they realize the situation isn't reversible. "He believes there's been a misunderstanding." I told him there hadn't. The deal was sealed, signed, and paid for. Still, I agreed to meet them, not out of courtesy, but curiosity. I wanted to see how quickly love could turn to calculation once money was involved. When I arrived at the house, their house, my property, I noticed details I'd forgotten. The chipped white gate Amelia once painted for school credit, the fig tree Dad used to brag about planting himself. Everything looked the same, yet different, like seeing a childhood photo after years of distance. They were waiting in the living room, faces arranged in tight smiles. Amelia looked pale, eyes rimmed red, her confidence stripped down to raw nerves. Dad stood behind her, his voice steady but cold. "You've made your point," he said. "Now let's be reasonable." I sat down across from them, calm, patient, letting the silence fill the air between us. It's not about being reasonable, I said finally. It's about ownership. Amelia tried to speak, but her voice cracked. You can't just erase us. I almost laughed at that, the irony of it. I didn't erase you, I said. You did that yourselves the moment you decided I wasn't family anymore. Dad's jaw tightened. We were protecting peace. You've always been too emotional. That word, emotional, had followed me my entire life, used like a leash, a reason to dismiss anything real I ever felt. I looked at him steady. Emotional doesn't buy real estate, Dad. He blinked, and for the first time, I saw something unfamiliar in his eyes, fear. After that meeting, I didn't hear from them for a few days, but the silence didn't mean surrender. Rumors began trickling through mutual acquaintances, subtle and poisonous. People whispering that I'd manipulated the sale, that I'd used underhanded tactics. It was a familiar move. When they couldn't control the situation, they rewrote the story. So I did what they'd never expect. I invited a journalist to my office, the same one who had covered the property deal. I handed her a folder filled with proof, transaction records, the previous owner's signed release, and a timeline showing how the estate had been listed quietly months before. They knew it was for sale, I said. They just assumed no one would ever buy it. Her pen didn't stop moving. The article came out 2 days later, crisp and clear, my quotes neatly framed beside a family photo I hadn't approved, the three of us, smiling in a garden years ago. The headline read, "Estranged daughter acquires family estate, a story of silence, success, and old wounds." It spread faster than I expected. Colleagues congratulated me, acquaintances reached out, and strangers debated whether I was ruthless or admirable. But I didn't care about opinions, I cared about results. And that photo, that one image, became my quiet weapon. Because now everyone could see the truth they'd spent decades hiding behind perfect smiles. 3 nights later, Amelia showed up unannounced. I found her waiting outside my office building, trembling from something deeper than anger. You think this is justice? She asked, voice breaking. You humiliated us. I didn't deny it. No, I said, I exposed you. She stepped closer, desperate. You were always jealous of me. I let her words fall flat between us, because jealousy was too small a word for what I felt. What I'd built wasn't born from envy, it came from precision, from the patience of someone who learned how power works by watching it used against her. You're scared, I said quietly. That's new for you. She flinched, but then something shifted in her expression, a flicker of resolve. You don't know everything, she said. You think buying the property ends this, but Dad has plans. He's talking to investors, people who can undo what you did. I held her gaze, my pulse steady. Then he doesn't understand who he's dealing with. She left without another word, but the warning stayed. I spent the next few days tracing every possible angle, reviewing contracts, pulling strings I hadn't used in years. And that's when I found it, a name buried in an email chain between Dad and an old business partner. A name I knew, Thomas Grayson, my mentor. The man who'd given me my first job in real estate, the one who said I had the instincts of a shark but the patience of a surgeon. Seeing his name tied to my father's plans was like tasting metal. It meant this wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was becoming a game of strategy, and I just discovered my opponent was playing from both sides. I called Grayson that night. He didn't sound surprised. You've grown sharper, he said. Maybe too sharp. I asked him how long he'd been working with my father. His pause said enough. Long enough to know he's not the only one with something to lose. I didn't sleep that night. The city lights outside my window looked colder, sharper, reflecting off the glass like a warning. For the first time since this started, I felt something close to uncertainty, not fear, but recognition. They weren't backing down. And if Grayson was involved, that meant they were planning a move that reached beyond the house. I opened my laptop and began drafting a new set of documents, restructuring ownership, shifting assets, sealing loopholes before they could touch them. By morning, everything I built was tighter, cleaner, protected. Still, one thought kept echoing, he's not the only one with something to lose. When I went back to the house that afternoon, it was empty. The furniture was gone, the rooms hollow, the air thick with the scent of fresh paint. They'd moved out quietly, but not without leaving something behind. On the kitchen counter sat a small envelope with my name written in Amelia's handwriting. Inside was a photo, the two of us as kids, sitting under the fig tree, grinning at the camera, and a note. "You always said I never saw you. I see you now." I stared at the words for a long time, unsure if it was an apology, a warning, or both. Then I noticed the faint watermark on the back of the photo, the logo of one of Grayson's companies. My stomach turned cold. The message stayed on my screen for hours before I moved. "You started this. Let's see how well you finish it." No name, no number, just a challenge wrapped in calm threat. By then, I knew who sent it. Grayson had always spoken in riddles, using silence like punctuation. If he'd joined my father and Amelia, then this was no longer about property or pride. It was about erasure. They wanted to make me disappear from my own success the same way they once erased me from their family. But this time, they'd underestimated how much I'd learned from watching them. The next morning, I went to the firm before sunrise. My assistant was startled to find me there already working through files. I didn't explain. I began tracing every contract connected to Grayson's companies, every shared asset, every clause that could be turned into a weapon. By noon, the picture was clear. They were planning to merge one of his shell corporations with my company through a forced acquisition, using a clause I'd overlooked in our early partnership documents. If it worked, they could seize partial control and leak financial misconduct claims that would destroy my credibility overnight. They didn't just want revenge. They wanted my name buried beneath theirs again. That night, I called a meeting with my legal team, and for the first time, I let them see the personal side behind the strategy. I told them who Grayson really was, how deep the connection went. "We can fight them," my lead attorney said, "but it has to look clean. You can't get emotional." I smiled at that. I'd built an empire on emotion disguised as precision. I knew how to make control look effortless. 2 days later, the announcement came. Grayson and my father held a press conference together, standing shoulder to shoulder in that same confident stance they used to teach me years ago. A collaborative merger, they called it, to preserve family legacy and business integrity. The cameras flashed. Reporters nodded. And for a moment, they looked untouchable until the questions shifted. "Is it true your daughter owns the property under dispute?" someone asked. My father hesitated, searching for words, but Grayson spoke first. "Temporary oversight. We'll be resolving that soon." That was the moment I walked into the room. Every head turned. I hadn't been invited, but that didn't matter. I stepped up to the podium beside them, holding a folder of documents. "He's right," I said, my voice steady. "It will be resolved today." I handed copies of the papers to the nearest journalist. "For transparency, I've decided to release the full records of this transaction, including communications between Mr. Grayson and my father. You'll find that the property transfer was legal, the merger attempt predatory, and the planned accusations falsified." Gasps spread through the crowd like a slow ripple. Grayson tried to interject, but the journalists were already flipping pages, their pens flying. "You think this protects you?" he said under his breath. I met his gaze. "No," I said quietly. "It exposes you." By the next morning, the story broke everywhere. Emails leaked, detailing their attempts to fabricate claims against me. Screenshots of internal memos showed Grayson orchestrating the smear campaign. My father's signature appeared on documents that contradicted his own statements from the press conference. Within hours, Grayson's investors began pulling out, his name trending for all the wrong reasons. My father's company's stock dropped by nearly half before the markets closed. Amelia stayed silent through it all. That evening, she called. Her voice was calm, stripped of the arrogance I'd grown up hearing. "You've destroyed him," she said softly. "You've destroyed everything." I took a slow breath. "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending." She didn't argue. After a long pause, she said, "He's not well. He's blaming me for it now." I almost felt something, pity maybe, but it vanished before it reached me. "You chose to stand with him," I said. "You knew what he was doing." "He's still our father," she whispered. I didn't respond. Days passed. The headlines shifted, the public lost interest, but the silence in their house grew louder. Through a contact, I learned they'd left town, sold what little they had left of their reputation, and disappeared to another state. Grayson resigned from his board positions and vanished from the industry entirely. For a brief moment, everything felt still, like the world was exhaling after a storm. But stillness isn't peace, it's space. And in that space, I found clarity. I went back to the property one last time. The fig tree was gone, the gate rusted, the walls empty of memory. I walked through each room slowly, hearing echoes of laughter that once belonged to someone I barely recognized. I stood where the family photos used to hang and realized how strange it was that you can win and still feel like you're standing in the ruins of something familiar. Maybe revenge doesn't heal, it only rewrites the story so the right person holds the pen. As I locked the door behind me, I saw an envelope on the ground near the porch. No name, no address. Inside was a single sentence, written in Amelia's handwriting. "You got everything you wanted. Was it worth it?" I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my pocket. The wind moved through the empty yard, brushing against the broken fence, carrying the faint scent of salt from the nearby coast. I didn't answer her question, because the truth was, it wasn't about worth. It was about seeing clearly, about finally standing on solid ground that no one else could claim. And as I looked back one last time at the house that used to define me, I felt something subtle, sharp and quiet, like the closing of a door that should have been shut years ago.